So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Ocean Frontier Institute webinar introducing you to the Arctic Research Foundation. My name is Anya Waite. I'm the Scientific Director of the OFI, and I will be hosting today. We do have Adrian Schimnowski, the CEO and Operational Director of the ARF, coming in to talk to you. He is just having a bit of trouble logging in, so we'll give him a minute. But in the meantime, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on what the Arctic Research Foundation is all about. So we're very happy to have them talk to the Ocean Frontier Institute today. The Arctic Research Foundation is a private, non-profit organization which creates a kind of scientific infrastructure, particularly for the Canadian Arctic. And they operate cutting-edge research vessels and also self-powered mobile laboratories. So their overall aim then is not that different to, and aligns very well with, what the Ocean Frontier Institute does, and that is coordinating and catalyzing scientific, cultural, and economic research, in their case, particularly in the Canadian Arctic. And the ARF partners with governments, universities, and other research institutions to help them get access to infrastructure to conduct programs in the Arctic. And they also, as do we, build relationships with Arctic Indigenous peoples to advance the understanding of the region through traditional and Indigenous knowledge. So my view is that the ARF and the OFI are very, very well poised to work closely together. And I think that the infrastructure that the Arctic Research Foundation builds and supports is a set of infrastructures that we should really take an interest in and align with, so that we can do the most we can to leverage those resources for our own research. So without further ado, I will introduce you to Adrian Schimnowski. You've logged on now, Adrian.
Yes,
and Adrian is the CEO and Operational Director, as I mentioned, of the ARF. He's responsible for the maintenance and operation of the labs and research vessels, does a lot of, spends a lot of time in the field. He's a commercial diver and has some really interesting background in his education, including having studied fine arts and architecture at the University of Manitoba for his sins. So brings a lot of varied and interesting skills to this discussion. So Adrian, without any further ado, I will turn it over to you. Oh, and just
great. Thank you.
Yeah. Looking at the Q&A bar, that's correct, isn't it? My OFI colleagues will be looking at the Q&A bar for questions too after Adrian's talk.
Okay, great. Thank you, Anya. I just want to make sure, can everyone hear me okay?
Coming through loud and clear, Adrian.
Okay, perfect. So maybe if we can switch to the next slide. And the next one. Perfect. So first, thank you for joining this talk. Thank you for the introductions, Anya. I'd also like to introduce the ARF team who are joining the call. We have Tom, who's our communications expert and also vice president. We also have Christine Cox, who's our logistics support and science advisor. So they'll be available throughout this call to answer any questions. Later in the presentation, Tom will do a little bit of speaking to our media and strategy around that. So Arctic Research Foundation is a private not-for-profit organization, and we create new kinds of scientific infrastructure for Canada, Canadian Arctic, and we operate efficient cutting-edge research vessels, self-powered mobile labs. Really, our approach is about coordinating and building partnerships to catalyze scientific opportunities, cultural, economic research in the Arctic. We partner with many government agencies, universities, and all of that is really based around our communication and time that we spend in the North. I've learned over time that spending and living in the North, we really realize the true meaning of what the people are looking for when it comes to research, but also how to live in the Arctic. I've always approached working in the Arctic as being a visitor in someone's backyard. And we need to rely and listen to the people who know their home better than anyone else. So when it comes to learning about safety, building meaningful programs, it comes directly from the elders and the people that live there. And we are there to help and assist and be creative in planning, but really it's about meaningful program to support and help people. Next slide, please. So the foundation, we have infrastructure, we have research vessels, we have mobile labs. And the foundation really started from an idea on how to support science in the North in a way that can spread across the Arctic on small scale, large scale. Ideas from Eddie Carmack and Marty Bergman about building a mosquito fleet, a large fleet of many small vessels that have low cost operation, that are low cost to operate, highly efficient, coordinated, working together to gather as much information as possible. So over time, ARF has built a fleet. We are currently at 5 vessels that operate in the Arctic and northern Canada. It started from one vessel, the Martin Bergman, that was stationed in Cambridge Bay, Nunavut in 2012. The main goal of that research vessel is to support the Franklin operations, to support Parks Canada and government agencies in a very interesting project and involved all kinds of different technology. The Martin Bergman was strategically located close to the search sites. It was overwintered in the ice, very similar to how Franklin's men were trapped in the ice during the past. And it allowed us to be really close to the community. We did all refitting, building the ship, modifications to the ship in the North, and relied on local infrastructure and advice, wisdom from the people to make this happen. Within a couple of years, in 2014, Arctic Research Foundation, with partnerships, ARF, it's safe to say that we covered 80% of the search area. That revealed the first discovery of Erebus, HMS Erebus. 2 years after that, in 2016, our connection with the communities, meeting with Sammy Kovic and Joe Haven, we learned a story of a ship that was found 7 years ago. And within a day of hearing this story, the foundation supported Sammy's request to help him rediscover the vessel. And literally within 24 hours, we accidentally came across HMS Terror in Terror Bay, following a story. Now, what I'm trying to get at is that we could have all the technology in the world collaborating and corresponding, working together in unison. But if we don't take into account the voices of the people of the North, we're lost. So the technology is really the people. So moving forward and everything that ARF does, all the partners that we're involved with, we are always listening to that voice of the North, to the people as our guide. And it's created these amazing success stories where sometimes technology isn't the winning factor, it's listening to the people. So because of this, we've been able to expand and add a fleet of vessels. And what I'd like to really focus on now is the William Kennedy. It's a 65-foot research vessel dedicated to work in the Eastern Arctic, mainly Hudson Bay. It's a project in collaboration with University of Manitoba. Could skip to the next slide, please. So this research vessel, its greatest strength is that it's a flexible platform. We can have 20 people on board, up to 14 science crew. There's large working spaces, decks, a lab that can accommodate many different types of research. And we can operate 24 hours. The vessel is designed around hydrographic support. One of the most interesting things about this research vessel is that it has stabilizing wings that could be deployed into the water, and it creates a platform that allows a wide range of operating window within a heavy sea state. Because of that capability, we have successfully accomplished many hydrographic quality survey programs in Ungava Bay and Hudson Bay. That stability also allows safe work environment. Science crew aren't as tired because of the heavy sea state, and allows us to work 24-hour operations with ease. That's not meaning that the vessel is, we do have to stop when sea state gets to a certain level, but it's quite impressive. Relating to safety, the vessel is constructed out of Kevlar. There's areas of the vessel that are over a foot thick of Kevlar and wood construction. There's not many vessels built like this, and it was designed to be an ice class vessel. Originally a fishing crabbing vessel that was designed to do work in northern Labrador, where it encounters ice. So it's a very, very safe platform. Another benefit to the vessel is it's a shallow draft, 12 feet. It allows the vessel to get into shallow areas where large vessels like icebreakers and cargo ships cannot get to. It allows us to refuel easily and move into ports where most vessels cannot. The vessel also has a long range. On one fueling, we can go up to 30 days without refueling. There's many details here. I'm not going to go through all of them, and we can always send more detailed information to the viewers on request. Maybe if we can go to the next slide. Flexible platform, again, with this photo, we can see that we have the capability of deploying ribs, Zodiacs. Zodiacs are equipped to do different tasks. There's a large swim platform. You can't see it now, but it's just slightly under the water. But the swim platform is 30 feet by 18 feet wide. It allows for diving operations and other ROV or technical applications using the swim deck. We have large cranes that can lift equipment on and off A-frame. We have dedicated winches, one that has a data cable paired with a rosette, another winch that's heavier in construction that can deploy fisheries nets and other heavy equipment. You can see also the vessel is designed to be robust. The whole aft deck is stainless steel. So we have this stainless steel robust deck along with a Kevlar hull. Okay, next slide. Here's a sketch of the operating range for the William Kennedy. Now, our operating range is typically July 1st to, we can go right into beginning of November. Depending on the ice season that year. But it's quite a broad range. And the vessel has traveled over the last 2 years throughout Hudson Bay, James Bay, Hudson Strait with a huge success. The platform and the way ARF approaches outfitting the vessel with programming is that we're open to overlaying and overlapping science programs. What I'm trying to get is that if we know that there's 2 weeks of operations in James Bay, for example, and there's hydrographic work in a similar area through CHS, for example, and other programming on the way. Basically, what we can do is we can pair up research programs so that they parallel and benefit each other. So equipment can be shared. There's possibilities and ways of cost sharing to make the vessel affordable for programming. We coordinate where we have crew changes, where we bring crew in, flying them in, for example, or when we leave port. How we coordinate that is really important. And if we're timing it properly, we can save costs all around for the operation of the ship, but also for the science teams utilizing the vessel. The future plan for the vessel is that we are going to be overwintering in Churchill, Manitoba, once railway lines and infrastructure is set for that opportunity. So that could happen within 2 years. When the vessel is not overwintering in Churchill, Manitoba, it returns to the south, and we have it overwintering in Halifax or Prince Edward Island. So we have an opportunity to schedule two phases. We have an Arctic phase or northern research leg, and we also have the opportunity to do a research leg in the shoulder seasons, fall, spring, winter in the south. Maybe we can move on to the next slide. Maybe at this point, before I move on, I'm going to quickly touch on other research vessels that ARF has. Does anyone have any questions regarding the William Kennedy? Okay, so I see one question about ice capacity. So the vessel right now is certified to go to the edge of ice, but we're not an icebreaker. So that allows us to be in the north till approximately November 1st. At that point, Transport Canada tells us that we have to exit the Arctic. There is a way and plans for getting an ice class for the vessel, but that will take some time. So I have a question about, do we hire technicians for the vessel? Yes, we do. We do hire ARF crew specific to handle technician requirements, but we also combine that with our partnership with University of Manitoba and other universities that are looking for this vessel to be used for their programming. So it's, in a way, we're flexible on building opportunities for the program. It's always tailored to adapt to the season at hand and the profile of programs working together.
There's a couple of questions in the Q&A bar. Potentially, could you discuss daily rates for budgeting purposes? And also, does the ship have dynamic positioning?
Okay, so the ship does not have dynamic positioning. We've been able to hold station with the twin screw and positioning the vessel within the current and wind, and it's worked out really well. Rates, we have 3 different rates. We have a commercial rate, or where if we're doing hydrographic work or commercial work, the rate is at 15K per day for 24 hours plus fuel. For research universities, we're down around 12K per day. That includes fuel. But we partner with other universities, users using the vessel so that we can cut costs to make it efficient. And that's how we approach it. Any other questions?
You've got a question from Mohammed. Any program to develop specific application or software to support operations?
That's a good question. I'm not sure how to answer that. You're asking a lot there. I think
actually, I can field a bit of that in terms of our database. So we're actually working right now with MyTax and the University of Manitoba and Red River College to build a database to kind of bring all of the disparate types of research that we would do, everything from images of ice flows to alphanumerical data regarding power usage of our mobile labs to hydrographic and mapping data, all in one database. So we are currently building that at the moment. And it's something that we're hoping to kind of have the first phase of it done in the next year or so.
So adding to what Tom is saying is the way ARF has approached research with all our vessels is that if we are heading in a direction, we are going to outfit the vessel like a Mars rover. We'll have instrumentation hanging on every square foot of the vessel as much as possible, and we're going to make use of our time. So what that means is we can have many different types of programming. We can have programs that are dedicated to oceanographic sampling, but we could also have instruments that are automatic, that are just recording underway systems, and we can combine all those things together for a very well-rounded program. Yeah.
Cool. And we have another question from Alexandra. Do you hire Inuit and community members during the lands, during the trips?
Yes, we do. We have hired guides to assist in navigation and operational planning. We hire crew wherever possible. So, for example, we have another research vessel that I'll talk about a little bit later, the Nahidic, where we have deckhands and guides, cook and crew, and small boat operators hired to do very specific tasks, specialized tasks that the people who know the area the best would be well suited. So we're always looking for local, and there's opportunities for training and building that opportunity. It's ongoing, and over time will be quite a large focus with ARF, and it's a high priority right now. Okay, so maybe what I'll do is if there's any other questions that come up relating to William Kennedy, feel free to ask, but I'll move on to just present some of the other things that ARF works on. Really, this is about instilling some ideas and open conversations so that perhaps there's a way that we can support your research in the future. So just to talk about this photo, this is the Martin Bergman, the first research vessel that ARF owned and brought into the north. This vessel supported the Franklin expeditions. We've learned a lot from this vessel, from overwintering, hiring local crew, to outfitting ships to support science. It's been a real learning, it's been our teacher and inspiration for many programs. Move forward, please. I just saw a question about leveraging AIS. We do have tracking systems on our vessel, and we are always looking at ways of being efficient. Now, sometimes being efficient means actually understanding the ocean currents and the winds. We've actually timed our planning so that we're moving with tides, especially with the Martin Bergman, so we can gain 2 to 3 knots and cut our fuel down by half. So it really comes from being in the environment. Any data that we can collect will assist in being efficient for operations. This photo here is a very interesting story. The small 40-foot vessel, the Jenny Pierre, was actually owned in collaboration with the community of Joe Haven. During 2014 operations, Arctic Research Foundation did a lot of work out of Joe Haven, and we found this vessel was zipping back and forth in the harbor, and it was run and owned by the community of Joe Haven, and it was to support the Hunter Trappers Association programs. Unfortunately, in 2014, the vessel sank and was sitting at the bottom of the harbor in Joe Haven for almost a year and then pulled out. Elders from the community were talking to me and asked if we could help and rebuild this vessel to support the community again. And ARF came up with a program to bring that vessel to Cambridge Bay, where we had infrastructure set up to repair and work on the Martin Bergman. So simultaneously, what we did is rebuilt this vessel and hired people from Joe Haven to assist in rebuilding it. Future captains of the vessel from Joe Haven were working on it. This year, we were planning on bringing it back to Joe Haven to support programs for the community and for the Hunter Trappers Association, but due to COVID, research programs and sailing was restricted to the point where we had to wait and defer this idea until next year. So this vessel is a co-ownership with the community and Arctic Research Foundation, and everything around this vessel is co-designed to support the community. It's also a great way to bring in science research teams, universities, and other government agencies into the community to build programming. So this is a really interesting success story. This vessel is actually a great training platform. So we can train future captains, deckhands for our larger vessels on this boat. And it eventually will be completely run by the community of Joe Haven, and with ARF always as a guide, as a supporting group for it. So move on to the next slide. So just a sketch again of the operating range in the southern Northwest Passage. Really, this is a combination of the Martin Bergman and the Jenny Pierre. Jenny Pierre is near coastal, close to the communities. Martin Bergman has a wide range. So all these areas we've performed operations. I would like to add to the right Chantry Inlet. The Martin Bergman has successfully charted and transited to the southern part of Chantry Inlet in completely uncharted waters. So there's very few vessels that have accomplished that. And really, in the Arctic, it is mostly uncharted. We could safely say 10% is accurately charted and the rest is not. So the ARF captains and team have found ways to successfully navigate through uncharted waters, either by sending scout vessels ahead, modifying searchlight sonar to see 500 meters ahead underwater, or following our guides. Our guides are local people who have sailed the area on small vessels over time to safely guide us. So next slide. This is the Nahidic, and it's stationed out of Hay River right now. This used to be a flagship for the Department of Fisheries and Oceans about 12 years ago. It's an Arctic class tugboat designed to do research, and successfully completed many programs in the Beaufort Sea in shallow and deep water. This vessel can transit the Arctic and back to Hay River travel the Mackenzie River, do work in Great Slave Lake on one fueling, and amazing capabilities. It can have a total crew of 31, and we'll most likely expand that to 40 in the near future. This is the research vessel that we are mainly focusing in on this year for Arctic Research Foundation. Most operations have been canceled in the Arctic, but this vessel, we found hydrographic opportunities and fisheries research in Great Slave Lake, so that we are able to perform a complete program this year. So this is something that the vessel that have huge opportunities in the future because it can sail in lakes, Great Lakes. It can transit the Mackenzie River, do work in the Mackenzie River Delta, Arctic, in the Northwest Passage and the Western Beaufort Sea. So I won't talk too much about that, but if you are looking for information, we can send detailed specs of all our ships actually to you, and we'd be open for discussions on future opportunities. So next slide. Speaking to elders, elders will always say that youth is our opportunity, is our future. And over the years, ARF has supported many youth programs. One exciting program is a collaboration with Northern Youth Leadership on board the Nahidik. This year we have two programs, two 7-day programs on Great Slave Lake that will bring high school students on board the ship, and they will be hands-on with all operations for with the ship. So they will be able to work side by side, captains, deckhands, bridge watchmen, cooking crew, scientific crew, and learn, in a way, job shadow, and learn about future opportunities. What this does is it inspires youth to possible career opportunities, whether it's a mechanical engineer to a science researcher. And it really opens the door to communication with communities around the lake and beyond. It's a pretty amazing program. So this is something that a program that will be involving with all our research platforms in the future, always looking for ways to support youth, finding funding to build programs that will truly benefit our youth in the North. Move. Next slide, please. We also have vessels on the coastlines. The Tirierneck is on the west coast. It was a former patrol vessel for Coast Guard, and ARF modified it to a research vessel. It's a small 65-footer, ideal for West Coast operations, and will support up to 6 science crew on board. And again, if you want more details on this vessel, we can send it to you. The next slide. So earlier in the presentation, it was mentioned that ARF has built mobile labs. And there's an interesting story to this lab and this idea. And it wasn't an idea that came from research scientists or programming. It actually came from speaking to artists who live in Cambridge Bay, who would come to the ship, the Martin Bergman ship, when it docked for crew changes. This is also influenced by my past training as an artist and architect. I spend a lot of time talking to artists, asking what they do, how they do their work, and how can we find ways to create opportunities so they can continue to do the work in a safe way, and maybe find opportunities for a better facilities to explore their work. So it quickly turned into looking at a mobile a container that was used as a makeshift workshop on the dock, to working with 12 artists, refitting that container into an art studio. From there, it moved to, well, how do we power this container? And I came up with an idea of, well, let's go off the grid. Let's power it with solar and wind. And over time, it's evolved into mobile research stations that can support wide-ranging research in remote locations, and now evolving into mobile research stations. I guess the latest success story, and we can move on to the next slide.
We've got a couple of questions that just came in actually first, Adrian. Going back to...
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so going back to Northern Youth Leadership, someone asked, is there anything like this for university students around Canada to shadow ship techs and get practical experience?
There's very few opportunities, and I think ARF is looking into ways of building that opportunity. So Northern Youth Leadership is a stepping stone, and I strongly believe that we can very soon build a larger program that involves university students. ARF has also become a partner with other funding agencies that will support that, mainly with MyTax. So there's some evolution and creative ideas happening. So there will be opportunities. We're just not sure how to best shape that just yet, but they're there.
Okay, the next question from Mohammed. Do you have continuous connection to all of these Internet of Things devices in the mobile labs, I believe?
Yeah, so that's what we're aiming for. But we also find that connectivity in the Arctic is extremely expensive, and also it's problematic in many different ways. So we have looked into having satellite uplinks so that data can be continuously streaming. We have used, if the mobile labs are close to the community, for example, in Joe Haven, we use the cell phone Wi-Fi system so that data can be transferred. So what that allows us to do is that we can track the efficiency of the systems, the solar, the wind, and the other equipment that's being used. And we can modify and change the programming of that system remotely so that it stays efficient. But the challenge is really the cost of having that connectivity. If we're in a really remote location, we're forced to use satellite communication, and that's expensive. If we're near a community, we can utilize Wi-Fi. One idea that ARF is looking into is that we can actually set a series of mobile labs to create a network. So instead of using a satellite system, we can beam a signal from one mobile lab to the next and utilize a phone system where we can connect to. And that could be on land, but also we could do the same thing in water. Yeah, so we can have remote systems measuring environment, but also remote systems that could be cabled to underwater.
And one more question, are blueprints for the mobile research labs available?
That is proprietary, but ARF is actually, we design and work with users to make it efficient. So the concept design it's all in-house, originally designed by myself. And we've hired engineers and technicians to assist with the technology. So it's, the idea is a flexible platform that can be adapted to many different types of work. Maybe you could move on to the next slide.
There is one more question about the vessels that just came in from Alexandra. Are some of these vessels used for multi-beam seabed mapping? If so, do you provide operators for this type of equipment?
Yeah, so we, with the, for example, the William Kennedy, it is set up with a multi-beam system, a WASP system, but we also have hydrographic systems like R2 sonic systems, multi-beam poles. Really, we have multiple ways of deploying and attaching multi-beam systems depending on the program at hand. And that's with all our research vessels. So yes, we'd be looking at hiring technicians to assist with programming, but we're also going to be collaborating with engineering groups like Seaforth Engineering out of Halifax, and also working with the Canadian Navy on providing technicians with that capability. All right, so again, just an example of working with youth and scenarios of how we can utilize mobile research stations. So this photo here is taken in Byron Bay, which is about 400 kilometers west of Cambridge Bay. It's a fisheries research, it's a fisheries for Arctic char. I've taken students up with me to service wind turbines and also work with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans on programming related to char. So this mobile lab in particular was set up with aquariums, chillers, and heart rate monitoring devices so that research could be conducted on how well char can respond to varying temperatures. That was a research program led by from University of BC and also DFO out of Winnipeg. So it's just an example of how variable and useful the program, these mobile labs can be, and they run off the grid. Now we say we run off the grid, but we also have an emergency backup generator in case we have a failure with the technical systems. This is to make sure that we maintain battery storage, but also if critical experiments are underway, if there is a failure of some kind, the generator automatically kicks in to save the work. Really, we see the generator operating maybe in the summer when you have full wind and sun. It may operate for a couple hours a month, mainly to maintain batteries. In the winter, the generator will kick in more often, but that's due to extreme temperature changes. But it's very, very efficient. And again, opportunities for youth are so important. So any way we can involve youth in programming, ARF will find a creative way to do that. So next slide. Conditions can be harsh. So this is in Johaven, setting up wind turbines for the Narvik project, a much larger project where we have 2 large wind turbines that sit on the ground. Again, the idea of mobility and flexibility to the environment is important and key. So here we have a combination of a team from the south, half the team from the south and half the team from Johaven working together, installing equipment. Next page. Narvik is a really interesting project in that right from the grassroots starting, it was an idea that was co-designed with the elders and the community right from the very start. And this was actually related to the time spent in Johaven around the Franklin expedition days. The community had talked to ARF, to myself, at many different points, asking, is there opportunities, ways we can give opportunities to youth, ways we can talk about food security, and the list goes on. And So right from choosing a site to naming the project, all the way forward, it was a co-design project with the community. We've had many meetings in person, often with 12 to 20 elders. I always expected that the meeting would last an hour, but it would end up going 4 hours because of the stories and wisdom that the elders wanted to share and teach. And we've basically listened to every step of the way, and it's a great success story. So now, right now, currently, we have a research station that's geared to grow containerized crops. This is a collaboration with the community of Johaven, Canadian Space Agency, Agriculture Canada, National Research Council, and many others. And we hired 5 technicians who are running the systems on their own with the support of the partners. And it's a start that will expand to different types of experimentation regarding crops, but also the community has a very strong interest in growing local plants, plants that were used for medicinal purposes in the past, to tea, to other ideas where this could create an economic opportunity for the community through training, providing opportunities for youth, and so on. It's a pretty amazing story. Next slide. So I think what I'm going to do is we want to talk a little bit about opportunities through media, through our website, our Arctic Focus. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Tom to talk about media opportunities and strategy.
Thanks, Adrian. So a big part of our work is, it's not just about doing the work, it's also about telling the stories and especially spreading success stories from the Arctic, because there's been a lot of negative press coming down from the north, but there aren't, the newspapers and broadcasters haven't necessarily put in the amount of resources into covering the Arctic that they have to the rest of Canada. So with a mind to that, we created Arctic Focus, which is our website and a publishing platform. And on there, we post a story. We post about 1 story a week, but we're in the midst of growing that to 3 stories a week right now, which is a target we plan to hit by the end of the summer. And we basically share news about Arctic research, breakdowns of scientific studies, stories both on Indigenous culture and mythology and from Indigenous communities themselves. We have a number of Indigenous writers who work on there, photo galleries, videos and diaries from the field, from our science researchers. And then we also have a number of publication agreements where we share content from other organizations. And we actually just as well signed an agreement with with Post Media to carry our stories across the country in their newspapers. So in the next couple of months, if you keep an eye out on kind of your local paper, because Post Media basically owns all the local papers across the country, stories from there will be appearing on their websites. Can we go to the next slide? So our communications platforms, not only are we growing Arctic Focus, but we've aggressively, basically from not having much of a web presence at all, we've now grown our Facebook to 16,000 followers, Instagram to 4,200, and Twitter. That's actually just as of the last 2 days, we just broke 4,000 followers on Twitter. So we're using targeted, low-cost advertising to grow that. The idea being that we're growing our audience as aggressively as we can to get out these stories. And the idea is it kind of creates a virtuous cycle, because in order to get funding, whether it be from politicians, governments, universities, nonprofits, everybody likes to see press. And if politicians, the people who kind of run the purse strings, see these stories and hear about them from their constituents, then that gives us more opportunities down the line. Can we go on to the next slide? So we're in media. ARF obviously we don't advertise, but what we do is we have such incredible stories that are so hard for other people to tell things like the Franklin expedition ships, things like Narvik, which was a major story across the country that CTV did a couple of really great videos about it, about the plants growing and the partnership and how it was built, which was then picked up by the rest of the media across the country. So basically what that is that when we partner with groups, with scientists, whatever the research is, we like to make sure that we're backing everything up with a really strong media strategy so that we get that story out there. And, you know, for anything, we would expect to get between $2 to $6 million worth of earned media for any kind of major story. So something about Narvik, the Nahidic, we're going to be having a renaming ceremony for that at some point in the future, which we expect will likely be national news. And basically, yeah, so that's part of the opportunity. And one of the things that ARF, that we bring to our partnerships is that we make sure that the stories are told. Can we go to the next slide? So this is an example of the story on Narvik from CTV. If you Google Narvik, Naurvik, you'll see some of the press coverage and also get some really neat video inside of the unit. Can we go to the next slide? So these are just some more news headlines. The first one there, Braving the Obvious Response, that's about the Nahidic, and that's a story just that there's going to be a naming contest held for it. We have a story about from CBC North about students learning, basically that's the Northern Youth Leadership Program, learning on the Nahidic, research missions, any kind of interesting novel research that we do will normally be able to get coverage of. Can we go to the next slide? And these are just a few more, one about the mobile labs, one about the Franklin expedition, and the next slide. And then a few more, just a bit more about the Franklin expedition. Obviously, that's something that really captured a lot of people's imaginations, and ARF is always looking to do kind of more interesting archaeological work as we're, depending on what area we're in and what opportunities are presented, because as Adrian said, we like to combine our work, our research to be as efficient as possible. And then the next slide, and Adrian, I'll turn it back over to you.
So ARF strives to do things differently, but it's all around listening to the community and the partners. We are not for profit, so we have to be efficient with funding and money so that we spread the dollar as far as possible. We have to show strong connections with media so that those success stories are told, but also it generates new ideas and momentum for new projects. We collaborate with governments, but we're not government. We talked about close ties to local and Indigenous communities as a root, as a grassroots idea for ARF, and it's led to so many success stories. Yeah. So we have all this, why do we do things differently? And I guess it's really about being efficient and being responsible to do work in the North. Something else that I also want to talk about is that due to COVID, because operations have been shut down for many groups across the North, that's also caused the William Kennedy operations to be shut down this year. So the vessel is sitting in Halifax at the Cove right now, ready for sailing. So if there are programs that require a startup this year for work on the East Coast all the way up to the Northern Labrador, we have an opportunity where we could provide that service and perhaps build a future program for you. So we're open to that conversation and open to looking at different ways of making that funding possible so that we can kickstart programs in a year that's very challenging and difficult. If you'd like any other further information about the vessels or details about what ARF, what we do in the North, follow up from the programs we've talked about and infrastructure, please let us know. At this time, if you have any questions, please ask. Christine, Tom, and I are standing by to answer as best as we can.
I see we've got I guess we're running short on time, but we've got a question from Mohammed. Do we have time to answer that on yet?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay. So, I mean, it seems like Mohammed, you're coming at that from kind of the communications angle, so I'll take that one. In terms of reputation, I mean, the biggest thing is that we've found is delivering on your promises, and in which case you generally can, as long as you're doing what you promised, you mitigate the odds of running into conflict with communities or in terms of the press. NLP tools, I believe that's natural language processing tools. I ran the war room for the Green Party during the last election. We actually used tools like that in that case. I think that this, just by the nature of this work, I think that it's much less risky that you would need something that sophisticated for kind of real-time social media analysis. But it's certainly a good idea to keep an eye on it. But otherwise, reputation management it's about carefully selecting and telling the stories, making sure that all the stakeholders involved are kind of pulling in the same direction and want the stories told, and allowing the communities to really take the lead on things. That's what we've found works well for us to ensure that our reputation remains strong.
Thanks for that, Tom. I guess just as a closing remark, first of all, thank you all very much for this conversation. Super interesting to hear what you're doing. And I think if you had a last message for our researchers in particular, we have a number of major projects, millions of dollars worth of research, some of which has been stalled due to limited access to vessels, and then particularly further challenges due to COVID-19. What would you recommend they do if they're interested in engaging with you on research programs in the Arctic, or particularly in our case, I think, between Halifax and your northern bases? Whom do they contact? How do they start the conversation with the ARF?
Well, I think feel free to contact the three of us, Christine, myself, and Tom. We would be your main contacts to initiate ideas and programming. And really, we're open to hearing what your program is about and what are the requirements and needs. And what we've often found is that if we hear one group has this requirement and we can fill in some other opportunities, we can build and shoulder programs so that they feed off each other. The earlier you can contact, the better. Mm-hmm. And for larger programs, maybe there's a way of designing something in ARF planning that will allow success for that long-term program. There's many ways of looking at it, but really we have to look at, well, what are the requirements? What are the needs? What are the issues that will cause a delay or stall? And let's figure out the details. Really, we're here to assist and help so that there's success. And research teams, if you have success, then ARF is successful as well. And it creates this momentum. Who knows where it's going to lead? So we're open to brainstorming and hearing ideas, and let's find a solution, something that works.
Yeah, and just to quickly add on to what Adrian said there, when you partner with ARF, we're not an organization that just kind of comes in and say, here's our rates. You want to use the boats, you pay this, and that's all you get. We co-develop pretty much all of our programming with our partners. So it's very much a back and forth relationship, and we look for long-term relationships, long-term projects. A lot of our projects have 20-year spans on them. Not that we don't take shorter ones as well, but that we really are. We're looking for partnerships.
Great. So listen, going forward on our end, Richard Davis would be the main contact for us, and also for the researchers who are on the call. If you want to reach out to the ARF, and just so that we have a coordinated view, Richard will be the contact point within OFI for this conversation going forward. So see, I'll ruminate too and think about, you know, how we could build going forward. We do have quite, you know, we have a lot in common in terms of how we approach research in the North, and I think we could learn a lot from you. And also we'd love to, you know, work up some collaborative research on the vessels. For those of you who are in Halifax, the vessel has been in Halifax. We've had a few tours, and it's a wonder. The William Kennedy is a wonderfully equipped, small but super effective little vessel. So really, really nice. And anyway, let's keep up the conversation. Thank you very much. And anybody who in the participant list who would like to take this conversation further, please reach out to Richard immediately after this call or over the next week, and we will take it forward with the ARF. Any final comments from our ARF colleagues or from colleagues on the OFI side?
It's Adrian here. I thank you for listening and participating in this talk. Please feel free to reach out to ARF, and hope to see everyone soon. I noticed that there's some more people interested in tours, so maybe if we can have a tours of the William Kennedy. So maybe if we could provide a list of people who are interested, and we can schedule a time for that. And yeah, just please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll love to talk shop and see how we can support you.
Thanks very much, and have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.